The death penalty is an issue that has the United States quite divided. While there are many supporters of it, there's also a large amount of opposition. Currently, there are 33 states in which the death penalty is legal, and 17 which have completely abolished it. In this speech, I'm going to argue that the death penalty should be legal throughout the nation. There are many reasons to why I believe the death penalty should be legalized in all states. I will refute the ideas that the death penalty is unconstitutional and that there is a disproportionality of race and income level. The use of capital punishment greatly deters citizens from committing crimes, such as murder. Many people's greatest fear is death deliberately inflicted by courts. Hence, the threat of the death penalty may deter some murderers who otherwise might not have been deterred. And sure, the death penalty is the only penalty that could deter prisoners already serving a life sentence and tempted to kill a guard or other offenders who are about to be arrested facing a life sentence. Ernest Vanderhaeghe, a psychology professor at Fordham University, wrote about this issue. And I take this quote from his essay. Capital punishment is likely to deter more than other punishments because people fear death more than anything. They fear death deliberately inflicted by law and scheduled by courts. Hence the threat of the death penalty may deter murderers who otherwise might not have been deterred. Vanderhaeghe brings forth the argument that capital punishment is the strongest deterrent society has against murder, which has been proven in many studies. Also taken from a study done by Vanderhaeghe in 2011 on the death penalty. He found that since society has the highest interest in preventing murder, it should use the strongest punishment available. It was found in this study, actually, that for every one criminal that was executed, a potential 7 citizens' lives were saved. Because other criminals facing similar charges saw what would happen if they committed the same actions. Capital punishment also acts as the deterrent for recidivism, which is the rate at which previously convicted criminals return to committing crimes after being released. If the criminal is executed, he or she has no opportunity to commit crimes again. Some may argue that there is not enough concrete evidence to use deterrence as an argument for the death penalty. The reason some has evidence may be inconclusive is the death penalty often takes a while to be carried out. Some prisoners stood on death row for years before being executed. This can influence the effectiveness of deterrence because punishments that are carried out swiftly are better examples to others. Although the death penalty is already effective at deterring possible criminals, it would be even more effective if the legal process were carried out more quickly instead of having inmates on death row for years. The morality of the death penalty has been hotly debated for years. Those opposed to the death penalty say that it is immoral for the government to take the life of a citizen under any circumstance. This argument is refuted by Immanuel Kant, a PhD from Harvard University, who put forth the idea that a society that is not willing to demand the life of somebody who has taken somebody else's life is simply immoral. In my opinion, it is immoral to not properly punish a person who has committed such a horrendous crime. The criminal is also executed humanely. He or she is in no way put to torture of any form. All states that use the death penalty use lethal injection. The days of subjecting a prisoner to hanging or the electric chairs are long gone. In the U.S., inmates are first given a large dose of an anesthetic so they do not feel any pain. This proves that the process is made as humane as possible. Although the issue of morality is very personal for many people, it is important to see the facts and realize that capital punishment does take morality into account and therefore it is carried out in the best way possible. The 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution prevents cruel and unusual punishment. Many opponents of capital punishment say that execution is cruel and unusual and therefore violates the Constitution. As was stated earlier, The recipient of the death penalty is treated humanely and is not tortured in any way, shape, or form. After the anesthetic is administered, the person feels no pain. The only part of the process that could be considered painful is when the IV is inserted. But this is done in hospitals on a daily basis, and no one is calling that unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld the death penalty as constitutional in cases that they have presided over. In the case of Furman v. Georgia, the court stated, the punishment of death is not cruel, from the meaning of that word as it is used in the Constitution. It implies there is something more humane and barbarous than mere extinguishment of life. The Supreme Court has not found capital punishment to be unconstitutional, and therefore this argument for abolition of it is invalid. Another argument put forth by death penalty abolitionists is the possibility of executing an innocent person. While this is an important issue, many people that argue this overestimate how often this happens. It is an extremely rare occurrence and has not happened since the death penalty was reintroduced in 1976. Stephen D. Stewart, the prosecuting attorney for Clark County, Indiana, who has a lot of experience with the death penalty, very effectively refutes this argument. I quote this from a news broadcast a few years ago. No system of justice can produce results which are 100% certain all of the time. Mistakes will be made in any system which relies upon human testimony for proof. We should be vigilant to uncover and avoid such mistakes. Our system of justice rightfully demands a higher standard for death penalty cases. However, the risk of making a mistake with the extraordinary due process applied in death penalty cases is very small. And there is no credible evidence to show that any persons that have been executed since the death penalty was reactivated in 1976. Stewart points out that death penalty cases are held to a much higher standard. Due process, in this case, takes much longer so that the court can absolutely be sure that the person is guilty before sentencing them to death. This helps to eliminate any errors that could lead to executing the wrong person. He also points out that although there is a small possibility for mistakes to be made, that does not mean capital punishment should be abolished. If everything that had potential for harmful mistakes were outlawed, society would be extremely crippled. It is true that there is a disproportionality when it comes to the races and the classes that most frequently receive the death penalty. It has been proven that minorities and those with lower income levels are overrepresented on death row. This is not due to discrimination. This is due to a higher rate at which these groups commit crime. It has been argued that poverty breeds criminality. If this is true, then it makes sense that those at a lower income level would more frequently be sentenced to execution than those at higher income levels. It is also proven that minorities are disproportionately poor, and therefore they would also be more likely to receive the death penalty. Ernest Van Hague, again I'll draw from him, says it best. Punishments are imposed on persons, not on economic groups. Guilt is personal. The only relevant question is, does the person to be executed deserve the punishment? Whether or not others deserve the same punishment, whatever the economic or racial group, have avoided execution is irrelevant. It does not matter what race or economic status a person is. If he is guilty, he must receive the appropriate